So without further ado, we're super excited to have Kaushik. He talk about and lead today's session to talk about how to leverage generative AI through prompt engineering to enhance the product development process. So super excited to have him. Just a reminder, if you have questions, feel free to throw it in the chat. If you're on LinkedIn, you can throw it in there as well. We'll try to answer them towards the end so that Kaushik can get through his amazing presentation. And with that, I'll pass it on to you, Kaushik. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ida. And really excited to be here. Welcome, everyone. I see some familiar faces, Sheriff, a few others as well. So really good to see you all. It's an honor to be here today to discuss an important topic for product managers on prompt engineering. So a little bit about myself. Kaushik Valluri is my name. And I have been in tech for most of my life. The last 5 years I have spent in conversational AI and Gen AI. And I began my career in a company called Lattice Semiconductor, where I was a product development engineer. And then I transitioned into the business side at Dell Technologies and focused on software automation primarily. And subsequently led a couple of products from scratch to finish, and really enjoyed just that entire product management journey from product development to through working through the different workflows and then launching the product and go-to-market strategies. One of the products that I created is currently in 50 different countries, so super excited about that. It was launched for a company called Toastmasters International, which is a public speaking organization. And most recently, I worked at a company called Quantify, which is a AI implementation company, primarily offering services to small and large enterprises. And I worked on a semi-supervised machine learning product to improve efficiencies in the contact center. So basically a conversational AI product. Currently, I'm working on a Gen AI product for B2B. So last year, as as Ida mentioned earlier about this this cohort on AI ML, so I was part of the last cohort that happened late last year. I really had a lot of fun. So if you have not considered joining yet, I strongly consider that you join it. It gives you a lot of practical wisdom about all these new AI technologies. So please consider that. On a personal note, I have been a person who struggled with a very severe stutter or stammer for over 19 years of my life. And now I have a much better control of my speech. So I have taken this as a challenge to speak in front of so many of you here. I live in Austin, Texas, with my lovely wife and two beautiful kids. All right, so let's get started. We have a packed agenda. So I'm going to talk about what is the objective of the session, and then we'll just touch on LLMs because that is ultimately the foundation of what we are trying to do from a prompt engineering standpoint. We'll also talk about some prompt engineering techniques, and we'll have some couple of demos as well so that you can see how it is done. All right. Many times when I talk about prompt engineering to people, they think it's got to do with a lot of, coding and engineering aspects of it. But don't worry, this is all using natural language. So that is the beauty of this. So let's move on to the objectives. So there's three primary objectives. The first one is basically to learn about some of these prompt engineering techniques, so you can apply it in your product management tasks, right, on a daily basis. Secondly, to use some of these Gen AI capabilities that we keep hearing about, and how can we leverage those in our product development workflows, and also the strategy discussions that we might be having with our management teams. Finally, I'm not sure if you'll have time to cover this, but just from a best practices standpoint for each domain, how do you really take this prompt engineering and then apply it to your specific domain. I know a lot of you are coming from a few different industries. So it's a good idea for you to take whatever you're learning back home and then play with it so you can experiment with it and learn more. All right. So with that, let's get started with LLMs, right? So basically, what you're seeing is an evolution of LLMs or large language models uh, from basically 2015 or so. One of the key technologies that was developed is, as you can probably recall, it was a breakthrough in the tech space. It's called the transformer architecture. And as you can see here, in 2017 is when Google came out with it. And that changed a lot of things, right? So ever since that was launched, we have seen so many different transformations, right? So Google came up with their, with their Palm LLM, then, the Bard LLM, and then now it's Palm 2. And the latest one, as you all probably know, is called Gemini. And that is their latest and greatest of LLMs. And they call it a multimodal LLM. So it can take in text or images or video, and then it can give you appropriate responses. So lots of things happen in the past 8 to 9 years. And when you think about it, this is just from Google, right? And then there's other companies obviously working on this. The biggest one, as I'm sure every one of you has played with, is ChatGPT, right? So that is by this company called OpenAI, as you can see. And then there's other up and coming companies like Anthropic, Cohere, Stability, and Meta has actually come up with some really cool open source models like Llama 2. So lots of players in the market at the moment. So we are, I think, in a really good time. We are in the cusp of technology and experiencing a lot of good things for us, which will make our life easier in the long run. Okay, so let's move on to this next slide, which talks about the 3 C's. This is not the typical 3 C's that product managers talk about: competition, company, and customers, but rather it's about how do you differentiate these open source models and the closed source models. So the first one, when I think about it, the first C is related to code access. So when you think about the source code, obviously for the closed source models, it's not open to public, but for these open source models like Llama 2, you can take a look at it. You can take a look at the hyperparameters, etc. That's a big difference. Second one is around customization and adaptation. And when we think about customization, you should have some ability to tweak some parameters if you want to customize the responses to your needs. And that is what these open source models allow you to do versus models like ChatGPT. And finally, community involvement and development. So there's a lot of community involvement, obviously, for the open source models. So as product managers, it's very important for us to understand what are these high-level differences, because if you deploy some of these models within your organization, you need to understand what some of these differences are. And a lot of times for us, we talk about how much is it going to cost us, right, from a budgeting standpoint. So the next slide talks just to that piece. So as you can see here, this is a huge spread between the amount of or how much does it cost for a model like GPT-4 versus the last one, which is Mistral 7B. So as you can see, as product managers, we need to at least have a grasp of how the cost structure is changing. And again, this is for 1 million tokens. I believe they broke it down between input tokens and output tokens. Input tokens is nothing but what you're feeding into the LLM, your prompt. And output token is basically what the response is back from the LLM. So some of these open source models, I mean, it's so amazing to see that they're so low in price, right? So if you look at Llama 2, it's just about 20 cents. Versus if you take GPT-4, it's $60, right? So it's very differently priced. So very important to note as product managers that these differences come up between open and closed source models. All right, so what are LLMs really good at and how does it impact us? So when you think about a traditional Google search and the way that we prompt or ask questions in an LLM like ChatGPT, there are some basic differences. When you think about traditional Google search, users input their query or keywords into the search bar, and then they enter return, and then you get an answer, right? And that we have done. Every one of us has experienced that. When we prompt something, prompting basically aims to enhance the user experience, by anticipating what the user might need through that prompt and providing relevant suggestions or responses without explicit requests, right? So a big difference between traditional search versus when you do your prompting on these LLMs. And sometimes, I tell people that they might have to unlearn what they have done while searching, and then they have to learn this new way of asking questions to the large language model. And this is a skill that we all have to gain as we go along. So the first task that it does really well is text summarization. And as the words are self-explanatory, you can see that, you give it a bunch of text or corpus of text, and it will summarize it for you. The second one is basically Q&A, where you ask a question about a corpus of text, and it'll give you very specific answers. And I'll show you in a few slides how that happens. And the third one is text classification. This is very useful when you have to sort through a lot of maybe messages, maybe sentiments from your customers, etc. So it will classify different categories for you. And then the next one is basically role playing. This can be a very huge asset to product managers who are using LLMs for prompting. Because when you think about product managers and their roles and responsibilities, you have to wear multiple hats, right? So sometimes you wear the hat of a sales consultant within your organization, or you have to wear the hat of a chief marketing officer when you have to think about marketing strategies. Or you could even think about being a financial analyst because you need to figure out how much that product is going to cost to build and launch. So this role-playing exercise comes very handy when you are in those situations, right? And then there's two more. One is called reasoning. It's very good with reasoning. And then the next one is coding or code generation. And I'm not going to cover much or actually any time on reasoning and code generation because just want to make sure we focus on the basics first. Then maybe if we have another prompt engineering session part 2, we can cover on the advanced and complex pieces. Okay. All right. So next, let's touch on text summarization. So as you can see in this example, this is an announcement that came from the Google product blog, right? So they recently launched a product called Pixel Watch, first gen. And as a product manager, if you are reading through these big reviews from different companies, maybe a competitive product that you are trying to launch, whatever the case may be, you would like to at least feed it into the LLM and ask it to tell you what the summary is of this entire big corpus of text, which is what we are trying to do here, right? So let's ask it a question and see what it says. So the question is summarize the text below in one sentence. So that is the question that you're feeding, which is also called a prompt. And then you get this nice response back from the LLM, right, about what it is. and what the overall, enhancing the overall fitness tracking experience for users, right? Just fantastic. You don't have to read the whole thing, but you got everything condensed in just one sentence. Let's go to the next task, which is very interesting. This is a Q&A, right? Same exact piece of corpus you're feeding in. And now the question or prompt is different, very specific, talking about what does hard zone training monitor, right? So for you to go and seek that information, it'll probably take you a few minutes. But now, like, you can see that it's very specific. It's telling you that it monitors the time spent in each of the user's personal heart rate zones during workouts. And again, keep thinking of the possibilities, right? Maybe you work with your own products and you write these reviews or blogs or product requirement documents. And imagine if you have to send that information to someone else. Imagine if you're able to maybe produce a quick Q&A, right? It'll be so much more powerful to the person or your team that you're sending to. Lots of efficiencies and productivity gains right there. The next one is text classification. So think of maybe customer reviews that you have, right? You want to sift through maybe like 200 reviews. What you do is you can just ask the LLM in terms of, can you classify the sentiment for me by feeding all these different reviews, customer reviews to it. So here the question is, I think the new Pixel has some nice features. Maybe this is a customer review that came through. And now you want to ask, just as a test, what is it, positive, negative, or neutral, right? And again, as I said, this is just one line of text. You can feed in documents to it, or you can feed in just as a big corpus of text and say, can you classify the sentiment from all these 100 reviews, right? Very powerful, very, very powerful. Role playing, as I mentioned, it allows for the creation of richer context. Again, think of your own roles. You as a product manager, you have so many different hats to wear. And here, like, role playing enables the model to, just better understand the scenario that you're trying to play and provide with very relevant responses. And also, by simulating these real world interactions that you might be facing on a daily basis in your company, role playing, just provides a more authentic experience for the model, so it can give more accurate results. So that's the power of role playing. So let me. So here, what I did was I asked it to wear the hat of a sales agent, and then you're asking it a question, and then it's responding as if it is a sales agent for the Pixel product. Okay. All right. So for prompt engineering, when we talk about it specifically, our goal as a user for all these LLMs is to improve the response from these LLMs coming back, and to get as close to the desired output or response as possible, right? There are a couple of ways that we can basically use to improve the response. It's 3 ways that I listed here. The first one is fine-tuning it, right? And this is something that takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, because you can imagine all these parameters that need to be analyzed and fine-tuned. So that obviously it's going to take a lot of time and money. The second one is what we call human in the loop, or reinforcement learning through human feedback, where you have these, we have humans who are checking the responses and giving a thumbs up, thumbs down. So that way, the quality of the responses coming out of the LLM keeps improving over time. So it's an iterative process, and it just makes sure that whatever outcome you desire, you can get it to that level. And finally, the third way to do it is through prompt engineering, right? So as you can see here, it's based on existing knowledge that the LLM has been trained on. However, through prompts, giving it more context, being more specific with what you want, you can tweak it in such a way that it will give you the best possible response that you're looking for, right? And that's why it's called engineering, because you're engineering these inputs that you're feeding into the system. Okay. All right. So moving on, why prompt engineering? So we just touched on that. In terms of what is exactly a prompt, prompt involves instructions and context that is passed to this LLM to achieve a desired task, which is what we have been talking about. And as mentioned earlier, language models are trained on a vast amount of data, right? That's called pre-training. And then once the pre-training is done, they are fine-tuned, right? Yeah, for your specific domain. And they use this data to generate the output based on whatever you're feeding it through this input prompt. However, the model can only use the information provided. So whatever is in your prompt is what it can provide to generate that output. And that means if the prompt is not clear or ambiguous, it's going to throw some result which you may not be appreciative of. So when you think about prompt engineering, it is art and science of designing prompts that guide the model towards meeting these specific objectives that you have in mind. Okay. All right. So moving on, what are some elements of a prompt? I just showed you some elements earlier. But when you think about it, there's three principal components, right? So the first one is the instruction that you're asking it. And then second one is the context. And the third one is the output. So here, when I look at this instruction here, I'm asking it to complete a sentence. And excuse me. And this was basically done on the Google LLM, right? So their Gemini LLM, or even Llama 2 also has this really good way of completing sentences, right? So each of these LLMs has its own specialities, right? So ChatGPT or OpenAI, they excel at Q&A. Whereas, Gemini and Llama 2 are really good with sentence completion. So context, the cat sat on the, and then cat sat on the mat, right? So, and then you give additional question or instruction or context here, and the dog, and it comes back with barked, right? So very specific instructions, very good prompts, and it gives you the answer that you expect. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so sorry, this is the slide I want to show. Okay, so pizza party, right? So when you think about prompts, a lot of times these LLMs that you access, maybe ChatGPT, for example, at least the web interface, it doesn't give you the opportunity to tweak different parameters, right? So every prompt that you send to the model, it includes these different parameters and values that control the response of the model, right? And the model can generate a response based on the data that is there in these parameters. So imagine you are at a pizza party and there's a long line of pizzas waiting for you to choose from. So tons of pizzas if you want to choose from. And think of temperature as a, like as the mood of the chef. So if the temperature is high or the chef's mood is really high, then that means that he's going to make some pizzas that may not be conventional type. So it may be pineapple jalapeno or jackfruit and basil, something a little bit very random, I should say. And when you think about the chef having a low temperature or a soft mood, then the output of the pizza is much more definitive or deterministic, right? Something that you can predict. So when temperature is 0, then your response coming back from the LLM is more predictable, versus when the temperature is 1, it's more unpredictable, right? So depending on what task you have as a PM, this is important, right? You can set your limits. If you're in a brainstorming session, right? You are talking to your colleagues, you're brainstorming some ideas, then you put a temperature as maybe 0.9 or 1. But if you are doing it in such a way that you want more concrete answers, then you set it lower, maybe to 0.0 or 0.0 or 0.1. And once again, many times we don't have that access, but if you access, say, OpenAI APIs, then you will be able to tweak some of these knobs and levers, right? Top P is similar to temperature. Top P is basically when you're told that you can only pick from a certain number of pizzas from the top. So that way it will limit your level of randomness. So these two are variables that machine learning engineers typically play with to make it either more concrete or more random. Okay. All right. So improving the response of your LLM can also be done through providing examples, right? So when we say zero shot prompt, that means we are not providing any examples. You're just throwing a prompt at it and you're letting it give you an answer. So this question or this prompt, what goes best with pancakes? And the answer that you get back is a bunch of answers, right? It could be either Nutella or honey or fresh fruit, syrup, maple syrup, etc. So now if you want to get to an answer that is closer to reality, which is typically maple syrup, then you have to tweak this model. You have to engineer this prompt, not the model, sorry. So you engineer the prompt, you add one question. And the question is, what goes best with pancakes? And the example that you give right next to it is apple pie is to custard as pancake is to what? Right? So then it will give you two answers or some answers. It will say syrup or maple syrup. So as you can see, we are trying to narrow down the answer to what you really need in reality, right? And then you throw one more example, and then it will. So here is rice pudding is to cinnamon versus pancake is to what, and then it will show you the answer maple syrup, right? So this is what prompt engineering is. So going from these number of different answers, which may be true, to something that is more isolated, which is more predictive, in your opinion, based on your experience. Okay. All right. So moving on, let's talk about some best practices and some limitations. So here, the first one is to be conversational, right? So you talk to your LLM as if you're talking to a colleague or you're talking to a friend, right? So instead of asking, give me a product plan, you kind of give it more of a conversational tone. You say, hey, write a detailed product plan for the launch of a brand new product called XYZ, right? So very conversational tone, very important to have that. Second is to avoid ambiguity and be more clear in the way that you're asking it. So using clear, concise instructions with no ambiguity is what we're going for here. So question is 5 interesting questions to my CPO versus give me 5 thoughtful questions to ask my CPO about the product strategy and roadmap for next year, right? So adding some clarity is important. Thirdly, context is king, right? As we all know, the more context you provide, typically better that is. And here we are adding more context, right? So as a PM, if you're hiring a product manager or like a product analyst in your group, you can be more specific in terms of who you're hiring. And in this case, you're hiring a UX designer, and you're asking the prompt, the LLM, to give you a job description for that person. Finally, being specific, so using very specific and relevant keywords in your prompt will help the LLM to generate more accurate and relevant results, right? So as you can see here, it's very specific, very to the point in terms of creating the project plan for the launch of a brand new product. Time frame should be from X to Y. So being conversational, avoiding ambiguity, sharing context, and being specific. Very important to remember every time you put a prompt in. All right. So why is good prompting important for product managers? A couple of different reasons. So number one is obviously we want to cut down on the time that we spend at work doing mundane things. So by using the right prompts, you're able to increase or accelerate the the quality of work and also the quantity of work that you perform. Second is you can easily integrate the output from these LLMs into your workflows, right? So imagine this job description that we just talked about. Imagine if you're able to feed it into your workflow, so you don't have to spend a lot of time just doing these standalone tasks. You can integrate the whole flow and you can launch it. Finally, as you are engineering these prompts, the model is also learning in terms of what you're looking for, and it gets enhanced, so it gives you better responses over time. So what are some of the limitations for prompts? So sometimes, when the context is not there, it might throw some hallucinated responses. So we have to be careful about that. So in those cases, adding some context to your prompt is important. So that way you are getting the desired results. Second one is bias. I cannot stress enough how important this is. Bias in prompting. Um, so again, bias also depends on how these models have been trained on, right? I don't know, but I don't know how many of you have seen recently, but there has been some backlash with some of the Gemini models throwing some really inappropriate results when prompted on certain words. So we just got to be careful in terms of what the bias is and what you're prompting, whether there's any bias in your prompts as well. And there are ways to remove bias in prompting. Finally, when it's not able to answer your question, just similar to what we discussed earlier on limited context, maybe you need to add more training data as well. Maybe it's not trained on your specific domain. So adding that additional training data will help it give you the right answer. So I just want to spend just a minute on the bias piece. So here, a bias in prompting. I'll just let you read it here. So the first one is basically the kindergarten teacher married a mechanic. He was a friendly person. In this sentence, who is a friendly person? The kindergarten teacher or the mechanic? Okay. And here, ChatGPT comes back with the kindergarten teacher. Okay. He refers to the mechanic. Right. So the mechanic is described as a friendly person. So think about it. The way that it has been trained on, this is not accurate because there is some bias inherently in the model, right? It is assuming that the kindergarten teacher is a female and the mechanic is a male, right? So very important to note and see where these biases happen, and that way you can be more attuned to the responses that are coming out. The same thing at the bottom, right? It says that the kindergarten teacher is described as a friendly person. So it's assuming the teacher is a female, which may or may not be true. All right. So moving on to the typical product manager tasks, right? And the applicability of product engineer or prompt engineering to this is that when you think about these tasks, they break out into two different pieces, right? Strategic versus tactical. So vision and strategy, if you need to present to your senior management team or your CEO, you're looking at more of these milestones, more of these decision-making, tasks that you need to do for creating the vision for the product. Versus if you do something like feature prioritization, then it's more tactical, right? You got to look at some of these different steps in terms of, got to look at the different user groups, look at the prioritization matrix, what are some of the scores, things like that. So I'll just tell you that each of these different tasks has a different way of prompting, right? You have the different prompting strategies, and I'll show you what some of them are. Okay. So this is a cheat sheet for PMs that talks about specific prompting techniques. So if you want to do the role playing that like we talked about earlier, then you say, hey, take the or act as as a financial analyst or act as a legal consultant, and then it can give you really good feedback. Or if you're doing very detailed kind of prompting, then you go with sequential prompting. You give the prompt, then it comes back to you with an answer, then you give some more information to get that detail. Okay, so just a few prompts that are really helpful for product managers as you are learning these prompting techniques. Okay, so here is an example. So as a PM, when you're thinking about a product, you might focus on its different features. What does the user engagement look like? What are some of the growth strategies? And what are some of the future plans and roadmaps for this product? And as a product, when you think about WhatsApp, for example, that I have chosen here, WhatsApp is a very versatile messaging platform that offers a range of communication services and tools via either text or through video, primarily connecting two people or communities together, people together across the world. And it has experienced, as we all know, it experienced a huge growth just in the past 10 years or so since it has been launched, with over 1 billion users that are chatting, talking to each other every single day. We know it's evolving over time, and from a user group standpoint, it has users both who are consumers and businesses. So I came up with 5 different stages or steps, right, where we can use prompt engineering. First is user research, then you do brainstorming of these features, identify what feature may work for you, and then do some feature scoring and do prioritization matrix based on those scores, and using prompt engineering to help us out. Okay, so when you go to user research, right, typically the way that you prompt it, right? So what do you think is the most frustrating part of using WhatsApp for messaging? So you're asking it to tell you what it thinks are some of the pain points or challenges are for WhatsApp. So I would like to demonstrate side by side. So let me see if I can do this here in my other screen. I'll go to Chat GPT. I just want to show you a flavor of what a simple prompt does versus a advanced or refined prompt. Okay. Ida, can you see my screen that says Chat GPT? Oh, fantastic. Okay. So let's go with this first question, right, and see what it throws out. Okay. So I'm going to paste it here. And let's see what it comes up with. Okay. So you can see here, right? One common frustration with WhatsApp is dependence on stable internet connection, blah, 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 right? So very, it's a very dull answer, right? When you think about it, when you ask it to do some, or some kind of, ask it for a response, I should say. But let's do this advanced or refined prompt. And now let's see, when you look at the refined prompt, I just want to show you a couple things, right? So what you are doing here is that you are being very specific. Remember those 4 pillars we just talked about? Having the conversational tone, being specific. Those pillars are what are being used here, right? Your task is to conduct user research to better understand user behavior, preferences when it comes to WhatsApp. Use a combination of qualitative, analytic, and quantitative research methods to gather data and validate assumptions. Your research should include at least 30 participants, blah, 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 right? So you are crafting a prompt that is very comprehensive, and that way you can get the kind of data that you want or answer that you want. So let's see what it says. Okay, so you see the richness of the response here compared to what we just did for the first question, the simple question, right? So it's talking about research objectives, research methodology, that you got to find these focus groups. You got to perform in-depth interviews, perform qualitative research, online survey. So it's giving you a blueprint of what you could be doing when you have to perform your own user research, right? So imagine how much time it will save for you, just to do some of these tasks. So let's go back here. Go to the next step, which is brainstorming, right? So simple question that we typically ask is, what are some features that would make WhatsApp even more useful? And then the second one, and then like a more advanced or refined prompt. So here again, it's like a role play that you're telling it to take on, which is to assume the role of a product manager for WhatsApp and come up with a list of potential features, right? From a brainstorming standpoint, let's see what it does. So I'm going to take the first prompt, simple prompt, and let's see what it comes up with. Okay, not bad, not bad. So list of different features that it just came up with. And again, some of these may be applicable, some may not. So if you want to make it more relevant to what you're trying to do, let's take the refined prompt and put it here and see what it does. Okay, so this definitely seems to be a more thoughtful response, right? More broader, I would say. And it's also giving some data that is substantial on something else. So like this thing like is completely, I could never think of this one, blockchain-based secure messaging, real-time language translation, which will be fantastic for WhatsApp. I don't know if that even exists today. Personalized chatbots. I think now they have a AI chatbot for WhatsApp, which just came like a couple of months ago. Emotion detection and emoji suggestions. This is a great feature. So as you can see here, the way that it is composing the results based on the prompt that you just gave is much richer, very contextual and very applicable to what you're trying to say or trying to get back from this LLM. All right, so I know we have 15 minutes left. I'll just power through the last couple of slides here. So moving on, identifying the key features, step number 3, very similar to what we did. I'm not going to do this, just in the interest of time. And then feature scoring. And I'll tell you one thing here, right? So if you just say on a scale of 1 to 5, how important is this feature? Okay. And again, think of what features that it created in the last step, in step 3. And then you can incorporate that and you can feed it into this question, right? On a scale of 1 to 5, how important is WhatsApp? Is that WhatsApp has feature X, whatever you choose from it. We saw the blockchain one for security and a few other things. So you could feed anything in, or you could say, hey, can you give a list of these features, right? And then it's scoring as well. So let's see what it does with this prompt. Okay, so it's listing feature by feature here, as you can see, right, for those 5 features. And then okay, so incorporating user feedback and research. This is awesome, right? So now let's do something slightly different. Let's say you want to create a table for this score, right? So I'll say create a table with the scores. Okay, let's see what it does now. So as a PM, you can see the value in this, right? So you're able to quickly understand by looking at this table, seeing what the value is, what the impact is for each of the features that it is proposing. And so you can make a quick decision, right? So there's a number of different ways that you can tweak the model. And this is what is feature engineering, right? You are trying to tweak it in such a way that you get a response that that is close to what you're expecting. And that is what this is doing. So let's move on. The last step is prioritization matrix. So similar to what we just talked about. And what I did here is I consolidated all those different steps, and then I told it to use this mega prompt, as I call it, right? So let's see what it does with this mega prompt. Maybe I'll also say create a table because I don't have it here. Okay. Okay, so this is more of a comprehensive answer that you can expect, right? Starting from user research, what are some potential features that you can choose from? How do you score it? These different features across the different parameters, and what the roadmap should look like, and then the user feedback, research, trade-offs, compromises, etc. So just think for a moment on how powerful this is. As you launch your own products within your industries, just to get a second opinion, right? Even before you talk to your other team members, it's a really good idea to see a, like a blueprint of how it should look like. And then you keep tweaking this blueprint until you get a response that you desire, right? This is the power of prompt engineering, right? For all of us, it will really make our life a lot more productive. And just efficiencies, right, across the board. Wherever your product workflow is, whether it is on the strategic side of business, or if it's on the tactical side of product management, whatever tasks you do, you can leverage all this to make your life easier. Okay. All right. So just a couple more, and then we can jump to Q&A. Okay. All right. So I created a checklist for prompting, good prompting. These are the 4 pillars that we just talked about, right? Conversational, not being ambiguous, showing clarity and context, and being specific. Some of the other things that you need to remember. Sorry, Ida, go ahead.
GPT.
Oh, I'm still saying, oh, my bad. Okay, there you go. Better now, yeah? Okay, cool. So prompting, there are a couple of things you need to remember. So here, as PMs, it's important, sorry, right here. Okay. So as PMs, it's important to remember that there are some things to basically understand. Like when you send your information to the LLM, you should not send any proprietary or customer specific information. Very, very important, right? Because some of these LLMs, it's very gray area, right? When you send information, it doesn't really belong to you, especially these ones that are open, like ChatGPT 3.5. So it's the property of the company that runs it. So OpenAI owns your prompts and the data that is generated out of these prompts. So make sure as PMs, you don't send the proprietary information, redact all of it. Secondly, hallucinations will occur because it's part and parcel of the LLM. So very important to check your answers, also check for validity, see if you can get some attribution from these responses, right? So it can tell where it's picking from, which source or which document it's picking from. Next one is recency, right? Remember, like these models have been trained over a period of time. And when you look at ChatGPT 3.5, it was basically trained through January of 2022, whereas ChatGPT 4.0 was trained through April of 2023. So the data that you get is basically dependent on the time period when the knowledge was built for that LLM. Good to be aware of that. Next is bias. We have seen how bias can occur and in the responses that come back. So make sure that when you are prompting, you don't ask questions that are biased, or when you're getting a response, you expect it to show some bias based on how it was trained. Then what else you have? You have token context window. This is important because in some models, you can only feed 4,000 tokens, or approximately 3,600 words. So you got to make sure that you meet that limit. Otherwise, it will cut off your prompts. especially valid when you do these mega prompts, right? And the last one, which I didn't talk about earlier, is very informative. And I don't know why it does that, but if you say, take a deep breath and solve this problem step by step, you will get better responses. Okay. Similar to us, right? The human beings, if you ask someone a question and you ask them to hurry up, they'll think in a hurry. But if you tell them, hey, just resist that time pressure and take your time, then you might get a better response. So similar to that here. What I put together here is a cheat sheet for PMs, where we just talked about the different prompting techniques. Here are some use cases that we go through on a daily basis as PMs. Here are some plugins that you can potentially use within your workflows. And here are some alternatives to ChatGPT. We talked about Bard. So Bing basically uses the OpenAI engine in the backend. And then you have a few others. And then different formats, right? You can see the format as well. We changed the format in the middle of that prompt where we added a table, right? So you can literally change the format to the way that you wanted to respond with and change it the way you wanted to. So tons of opportunities for product managers. And I'm super excited with the capabilities of these LLMs and what they have to offer. Okay, with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Very insightful. We've got at least 4 questions and we're very short on time. But we had one from LinkedIn very early on. I don't know if you've seen it, but the question is coming from Satej. And it's, I've pondered on this question for a while now, that how will the jobs of SWEs and PMs evolve with AI? Will either become obsolete or will they evolve into something else?
I see. No, great question, Sutej, right? That's always a question that is hanging on top of our head. And I believe that people will lose jobs to people who learn or upskill themselves with AI, right? So learning these new techniques, becoming good at prompt engineering or prompting or prompt design, and just learning what else is out there, right? Because as product managers, we have to be curious with what is going on. And the jobs will evolve, right? When you think about corporations, they are looking for product managers who are conversant or maybe even proficient in some situations with the way that you use technology. Like, do you know how to leverage Gen AI capabilities, right? Think of it from a product management standpoint, right? You design your documents or, you make PRDs. How do you leverage this cool technology to make your life easier? Because ultimately it's about speed, right? Corporations want to capitalize on the fact that this new technology can speed up your process of either developing your product or even like taking it to market, right? So see how you can learn some of these technology, look at your strengths, look at some areas for development and how AI can insert and help you become a better product manager. Hope that answers your question. And just a plug here, if you have not considered joining this course, one course is coming up in May. Very practical wisdom that the leader will talk about in that course. So see if you can, participate in courses like that. Back to you, Ida.
In Zoom, and it's on LinkedIn as well if you want to apply.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you for the shout out. We have a question that came in from Kristen. She asked, when you provided the prompt for WhatsApp, asking it to evaluate 5 features, did you provide the list of features first or did it come up with them? Yeah,
so great question. So for this specific one, I just didn't know what this LLM was trained on. So it was blank. It was a blank slate. So I didn't provide any features to it. But the next level would be to provide some features and do that same kind of brainstorming. That will make it even more powerful.
Sushmita had put her hand up. Sushmita, did you still want to ask your question?
I've forgotten. There were so many questions along the line. It's okay.
Okay, sure. We have another question from Akshay. Are there any databases that contain custom prompts that you would recommend? I Googled for this, but the top results didn't contain any useful results. I Googled for.
Yeah, so great question again. So some of the prompts that I have created, I mean, I don't know, Ida, if we are going to share the deck with everyone.
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool, perfect. This is multiple websites. There's a website called Prompt Perfect. It'll teach you how to do the right prompt. There are some examples, some samples as well that you can leverage. There's also a person by the name of Rashid Hassad. You can check him on LinkedIn. He's really prolific in terms of offering these prompt engineering guides, and he has very specific prompts for different industries. So that is a place that you can leverage some of these prompts.
Perhaps just time for one more. Bias is such a hard one. This question is from Swati. Based on the context, it becomes more critical. How do you control the amount of bias?
Great question. So one way I can think of is you can ask the model whether it sees any bias, right? And that way, sometimes it will come back and say, yes, I made a mistake. I should not have assumed that this person is a male versus female in the example I showed you, right? And the second way is more intensive, which is to go back and train your data sets. Right, much more laborious, much more time and resource intensive. That is one way that I can think of, just removing bias. But again, there will be some inherent bias in the system, which is really hard to get rid of.
Amazing questions. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but thank you so much for such an insightful talk. I think we all learned a lot of really interesting things today. That we'll be applying in our daily work. Just again, a reminder, 6 cohort applications are open now and space is limited. I put the link into Zoom and it's in LinkedIn as well. Join us next week. James Wall from Meta is joining us to talk about navigating responsible AI, ethical frameworks for product managers. And we'll be excited to see you all again. Thanks again, Kaushik, and everybody.
Thank you, Ida. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everyone.